Hi everyone! Now as part of our triangles unit, we're going to use information that we know in order to find angle measures. So let's get started. There's a few things to remember. First of all, the sum of the angles in a triangle is 180 degrees. Vertical angles are congruent. Those are the angles that are across from each other, formed by two lines. Angles that form a linear pair are supplementary, or they have a sum of 180 degrees. So if you see a line and two angles that form that line, we know that we can set them equal to 180. And lastly, in an isosceles triangle, the base angles are congruent and the legs are congruent, right? So even if a problem only gives us the tick marks indicating that the legs are congruent, we can assume that the base angles are congruent as well. And the same goes the opposite way. If it gives us that the base angles are congruent, we can assume that the side lengths are congruent. All right, so let's get started on our problem. This one says to find the measure of the angle indicated. Now we see two triangles here with some information given. We're looking for this angle here, indicated by the question mark. Now look at this bottom triangle. We know that the sum of the angles in a triangle is 180 degrees, and we're already given two of them, 75 and 25. So if we just subtract those numbers from 180, and you can do that in your calculator, you'll get that this angle here is 80 degrees. And because we see a pair of vertical angles here, we can also mark this one 80 degrees because vertical angles are congruent. All right, now to find this missing angle, we can set up an equation because we know that the angles in a triangle add up to 180, so 60 plus 80 plus this unknown is going to give us 180 degrees. Right? And when you actually go through the math of this, you'll find that this missing angle ends up to be 32 degrees. So we can go ahead and label our diagram, and we're done. Right, moving on to another problem. We have a triangle with some angle measures given, and we just need to note that the angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees. So if you're asked to set up an equation, we can just take these angle measures add them all together and set them equal to 180. And after going through the math, you'll end up with x equals 5. All right, let's do another one. So in this problem here, we see a triangle and only one angle measure given. However, if we remember that vertical angles are congruent, right, we can see a pair of vertical angles here and another pair of vertical angles here. And that's going to help us label the rest of the diagram. So looking at this one, if we know that this angle is 105, vertical angles are congruent, so we can also label this 105. And the same thing, this angle here is x plus 51. So we have this as x plus 51. Now using the idea that the sum of the angle measures in a triangle is 180, we can just set this up into a nice equation. Right? We have the first one 30 plus x plus 51, second one plus 105 equals 180. And then you would just solve from there. And when you go through the math, you'll end up with an answer of x equals -6. Now remember that x can be negative as long as when you plug it back in, you don't get a negative angle measure. So this is allowed. Additionally, if you had seen that this angle was 105 and this angle was 30, You could have subtracted that from 180 and gotten that this angle here was 45. And then notice that these vertical angles were congruent and set x plus 51 equal to 45. You still would have gotten x equals -6 as an answer. So it doesn't really matter how you do it. I think the second way is a little bit quicker. But just throwing that out there if any of you did it differently. Let's try another one. So here we have a triangle where we have x labeled here and we have 37 degrees here. This is an isosceles triangle, and that's indicated to us by these arcs here. In an isosceles triangle, if you're told that these two sides are congruent, you can automatically assume that these two angles are congruent. That's part of the isosceles triangle theorem, right? So we know if this one is 37 degrees, we can go ahead and label this one 37 degrees, right? And again, we know that the angles in a triangle all add up to 180 degrees. So we can set up a nice equation here. X plus 37 plus 37 equals 180. Right, and then you would combine like terms and go through your math, and you'd get an answer of x equals 106 degrees. All right, let's try one more. In this triangle, you can see that these arcs have marked all of these angles congruent, which as a side note means that each angle is 60 degrees. You don't really need that for this problem, but just FYI. When a triangle is equiangular, it's also equilateral. So when we see these, we can automatically mark the sides congruent as well. Congruent means has equal measure, which means that 2x plus 4 equals 8. And that's the equation you would set up for this. I meant minus 2x minus 4 equals 8. We get 2x equals 12 and x equals 6. Right? Good job.